I'm standing here at the lower extremity of Mount Zion in Jerusalem. There's actually three Mount Zions, the first one being the ancient city of David, the second being where the Temple Mount's located, and then this area where historically the upper room where Jesus held the Last Supper and the tomb of David is, as well as the cathedral called the Dormition of Mary. And some intersteological digs have been done here fairly recently, starting in actually 1874. An Englishman began digging around this area looking for what was called the Essene Gate. Now, Pliny the Younger and uh, most extensively Flavius Josephus speaks of the Essenes, the Essene Quarter in the old city of Jerusalem, and the Essene Gate. And Josephus is even very specific about where this Essene Gate is. He says it's the first one as you go from the well-known Jaffa Gate heading south along the western wall of the city. He says it's the first major gate that one comes to. And so the Englishmen in 1874, later in 1889, began digging and found what they believed to be was this Essene Gate, but couldn't proceed any further. And then the dig laid fallow for a century until another archaeologist came along, and he began digging in 1988, following what Josephus had said. And lo and behold, he discovered a lintel of a door, or I should say the threshold of the door. And there were different layers to that, but he believes he found a doorway that was part of a wall that was built by Hezekiah in the 7th century BCE. And two other Israeli archaeologists joined him in this dig and confirmed that this was the wall of Hezekiah. And of course, later there was the broad wall discovered in the old city in the early 2000s that confirmed that Hezekiah had indeed, as it says in the scriptures, he had strengthened the walls, and they've now found those walls. And these ruins also show a part of that ancient wall. And this gate that is called the Essene Gate. Why is this of significance? Because if a people called the Essenes had their own gate and also had their own quarter in the city, it means that they were not just a mere obscure group. And because they're mentioned by Josephus, Pliny the Younger, and I want to say Herodotus, but that doesn't sound right. I can't remember the third historian at the moment. Then this is not a small isolated group just at Qumran, and there's some question as to whether the Essenes, the people at Qumran, were Essenes, but there still seems to be a lot of evidence that they were, as well as some Essenes at Ein Gedi, but also Essenes located in other cities in Second Temple, the times of Second Temple Judaism, as well as the first century when Jesus, Yeshua, was here. And they had a view of the scriptures and of Messiah that was a bit different from the prevailing view of the Pharisees. The Essenes weren't as large as the Pharisees, although even the Pharisees only had about 6,000 members. And the Essenes were probably fewer than them, but nonetheless numbered in the thousands. And they had a different view of Scripture, and we have some evidence of, for example, of their understanding of the Messiah as more, could we say, divine than just a mighty human ruler like King David or like Judas Maccabees. And we find from the Qumran scroll, M256, that 246, excuse me, which is referred to as the Son of God scroll. And so sometimes there's a tendency in certain circles to downplay the findings at Qumran. Well, this was just this little obscure group, and we shouldn't really pay attention to the writings that they had preserved or that they wrote. But the fact that the Essenes were more broadly distributed throughout the land and again had their own quarter and their own gate tells us that they had a significant role to play. It's, unfortunately, with the destruction of the temple in 70 AD and Jerusalem in 70 AD, many different groups, the Zealots, the Sadducees, the priestly caste, the Essenes, others were wiped out. And the only Jewish groups left to move the revelation of God forward were the followers of Yeshua, whom initially were all Jewish, and then also the rabbis who recreated Judaism, which we now know as Rabbinic Judaism, under Yochanan ben Zakkai at Yavne. Where here?
Just a minute. I know somebody.